Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of Bass Week, checking out phenomenal bass work, bass players, bass lines, bass grooves. Today we're going to be looking at Jaco Pastorius, looking at a live performance from 1982 of, I think, the medley of Reza, Giant Steps, and Revisiting Reza is how I'm reading that. Let's dive into this and see what they're bringing to the table. Very cool start. Very rhythmic oriented, setting the atmosphere already. Yeah, love the tongue trill on the trombone, it sounded like. Oh, we got a French horn here. Interesting. You don't see the horn too often in big bands. Or, I mean, just kind of in jazz in general. I see it says Jazz Fest back there, so that's really neat all on itself. Jeez. Did you hear that? Interesting cymbal placement. I love the sheer variety of percussion that we get to hear in this. Ooh. That's interesting too, because it looks like brushes, but they're wooden. Like a stick of wood that's been fractured at the ends into like 8 parts. But also you play within the drum, which is just... So it's like a hand drum. That's exactly what it is. It's like an inverted hand drum where you use mallet bass. Very cool. I was like, those valves look interesting. That's a type of flugelhorn. I thought I heard a tuba earlier, but much like the French horn, it's not something you hear in a big band. So I assumed it was just a trombone. After all that time, the trumpet still warmed up to just nail that note up there. Golly. That's an interesting trombone too. Oh, it's over. Yeah, I was enjoying myself. That did not feel, what was that, 11 and a half minutes. That did not feel like 11. What in the world? Anyways, that did not feel like 11 and a half minutes at all. So, what is going on here, though? Reza, I believe, this medley is called Reza Giant Steps Reza, as you saw up in the corner up there, and at the beginning of the track. And if you've visited the video itself, I always link the original video. I think it's important to listen to it on your own without my commentary and all that garbage. Reza is the big band section. It's the part that we revisited at the end. It has everybody participating. It's a humongous section. It's full of these big stingers, very brassy, very full, loud, energetic, and powerful. Giant Steps is everything that happened in the middle, which is going to be the bass solo into the lead bass idea, into the hand drum. uh, that's such a cool instrument. The hand drum solo, and I think we had a bass idea that took us back into the moment where the trumpets came in with those stingers, and we had the that core lick coming in from the saxophone section, and that brought us back into Reza. So that's what this song is, which is interesting because unless Reza and Giant Steps are separate songs in Jaco's discography, I mean, this is pretty much just a typical jazz song where you have your lick that everybody knows, your A section. Usually you will repeat that twice. In this case, it didn't. The B section, which is a solo, and a return to the familiar. Usually an AABA is this very standard jazz structure. And they kind of do that here. It's ABA, and if I hadn't have seen this title here, I would just assume this was a single track that followed a pretty standard convention with a small variation on it, being that we didn't have two A sections at the beginning. Plus, we had a bass intro, so that's a little different. So when we talk about this, though, I think it's important to talk about the two aspects separately, which is what I would do for a jazz track. Anyways, solo sections are, as far as I see it, more of a separate entity from the core lick. especially since the solo section, unlike in most rock and metal, is going to be different on every performance. So, let's kick it off with Reza. This to me is the part of the song that I resonated most with, and we'll talk about Giant Steps and my feelings towards it in a bit. Reza, though, is just phenomenal. It is everything I love about jazz fusion. It takes the power, the energy, just the raw electricity of rock music and puts it in a jazz setting. We have all of this forward momentum, this drive. It's even loud and, for a lot of reasons, both within the track itself. Most of the song, especially the bass oriented stuff, sits about 20 dBs quieter than the loudest point. There's a lot of dynamic quality or dynamic volume in here. And the Reza sections are consistently the peak of the track. So we have the loudness of rock as well. And it's very upbeat tempo, but it's done so in a jazzy way, right? If this was thrash, it would be extremely rigid, alternating snare and bass kicks. Or if it was, death metal, we'd have blast beats, just a constant stream of 16th notes on the snare itself, or the bass kick, just constant 16th notes on the bass kick. It's the rigidity of the consistency of the rhythm. But with jazz, we take that speed and we make it interesting. And that's not to say that straight 16th notes aren't interesting. They can be thematically appropriate. They were certainly interesting the first time I heard them. The first time I heard blast beats, I was just like, wow. But when it comes to something like this, it will always interest me more. And that might be a personal thing, might be, subjective. But there's a lot more going on while still keeping that consistency, that momentum going on. When you listen to even the opening drummer, who had the double-sided drum hanging around their neck, and they had a smaller drum head on one side, larger one on the other. There's a lot of nuance out of that, whether you hit with this part of your palm, or maybe fingertips, or maybe this part of your palm, or you get a thumb hit out of it. You got your knuckles between here that also have different timbres. If you hit in the middle or the outside, or pretty much anything in between. Snare and toms are also sort of like this, but it's more difficult to hit the nuanced elements out of it. Primarily because a lot of snare and toms that are used in drum kits tend to have, what would you call it? It's a rim that comes up over the drum head, like kind of like a lip, but vertical rather than horizontal. Whereas something like this is open on the sides. You can easily get to the outsides. You can rest your hand on the outsides and just use your fingers, right? There's a lot of different ways to hit these types of drums. Drums specifically made for hands. And so we have two of these, right? Two drums right at the beginning that can be utilized in a bunch of different ways. So we have different timbres. Well, I guess different notes. You can kind of modify the timbre, but it's not like changing an instrument. Yeah, it's kind of like a timbre change. Anyways, there's just a lot of variety coming out of our opening idea, sonically and rhythmically. A lot of energy, a lot of syncopation, a lot of interesting polyrhythmic ideas, especially once we introduce the other two drummers. There's three drummers in here, three percussion players. They're not all drummers. Four percussion players, actually. I forgot to include the hand drum dude. Yeah, I think we had four. And they're all overlapping each other, which is phenomenal. The drum kit tends to play more of the traditional rhythmic ideas. But something I really love, and I bring this up every time we get a chance to hear it, is the auxiliary percussion. Percussion isn't just snares, bass drums, toms, and cymbals. Percussion is a huge slew of things that you hit. Oh man, I just slipped the name. I was going to say all of them falling under I think it's idiophone. Uh, title, which I think is anything that makes a sound through vibration of the self, because most things make sound by vibrating the air. But I think the thing itself must vibrate. Like when you hit a wood block, the block itself vibrates. I think that's what it is. Man, I gotta freshen up on that. All instruments are placed under four general ideas. Aerophones, which are ones based on air. I think it's idiophones, which are ones that vibrate themselves, usually by being hit. A lot of percussion falls into that. And off the top of my head, I forgot the other two. Like I said, it just all that just slipped my mind. I was ready to go in that direction, and it just slipped my mind. Anyways, there's a lot of percussion out there though, and we get to see a lot of really cool things in here. We got wood blocks, we have a bunch of hand drums, we have the hand drum, which is well, usually the ones I've seen are convex. They're like a dome. And different pieces on it are bent different ways, and when you hit it, you get a specific note that's all pitched, and you can play melodies on it. And this was concave. It went inward. It was like a being inside a dome. I don't know. And he reached into it and hit the stuff with mallets, which is just very cool. Beautiful sound too. It had that metallic pinginess of like a glockenspiel, but it was a lot softer on the ears. Glockenspiels can, for me, they can really get shrill depending on what type you're using, what type of metal they're made out of. This was just very calming, but not but having that colder sound, not like a marimba or a xylophone made out of wood that has that natural warmth to it. So this was just, I mean, it was just a beautiful tone. Where was I going with all? Oh, I saw, yeah, with the drumming, the rhythmic aspect, the speed of it all. Um, Everybody's just playing so fast. Every time they showed a drummer, their hands, all their arms were constantly moving, which I think is interesting when we look at a lot of, well, like death metal drummers, right? And we look at something with like 16th note bass kicks, blast beats on the snare, and cymbals every once in a while. It's very not moving. It's all wrist work, right? Because you need to be fast, and moving an entire limb is going to be slow. So like especially like blast beats, it's very much wrist work. Until you get gravity blast, and then you're kind of working on a double fulcrum where your arm is moving and your wrist, kind of getting this double movement idea. But there's just not a lot of large movements to it. And it's because everything's kind of constrained to a specific area and moving as little as possible to achieve the speed and rigorous pattern. Whereas here, these drummers are all over the place because they're just going for all sorts of different sounds all the time, just really trying to work it into something that is full of contrast and dynamic qualities. And I think that's it's what has me gravitating to this style of drumming more so than some of the extreme metal drumming styles. Because while they're equally as impressive and sometimes more impressive with stuff like gravity blasts, like how do people even come up with that? They're just very monotonous, and for better or worse, a lot of those styles, a lot of people tell me that it helps them. They kind of meditate, or the drums bleed into the background, sort of like a white noise. And there's certainly a time and a place for that style, but it's never really going to be something that I really enjoy listening to on it. I can listen to these drummers by themselves. It's just because of all this dynamic contrast going on in their playing. What instruments, what part of the drum kit they're wanting to play, what drums they want to incorporate, how often they're switching things up, and it is just a joy to listen to. Now, outside of the speed factor, I had mentioned that this also brings in rock's loudness, and a lot of this comes from the brass, the big band. And it's really cool. I pointed out a couple of times. There's a tuba in there. They got flugelhorns. They have a French horn. These are unusual instruments for a big band. It's not to say this is the first time I've seen them in a big band. They're just not popular picks. We'll put it that way. The stereotypical big band is going to be a handful of trumpets, a handful of trombones, and a handful of saxophones. Usually alto and tenor, and possibly one bari sax. Not usually more than that. If you have a five piece, you're looking at two alto, two tenor, and a bari. Sopranos are also a bit rarer, but I've seen a few of them. And then, of course, flute shows up every once in a while. Clarinet. I've seen a jazz clarinet. That was pretty cool. Just a regular clarinet itself, but the player was playing jazz through it, which is very cool. But tuba, that's neat. French horn is very cool. I've only ever seen one French horn playing a jazz group, and I think it's a beautiful instrument for jazz. So I'm just really excited to see all of the eclectic choices here. There's a lot of stuff going on in here instrumentally, timbre wise, that I don't see too often in jazz music, which is it's a joy. But so we have the big band, and they are loud. Every single time they come in, you know it's going to be big. And here's the crazy thing. So the first time we heard the band, they were kind of building into it. We had just come off the bass intro, and we were moving into Reza, or at least what I think is Reza. Maybe it's just the core lick of Reza. And I was like, dang, the trumpets are hitting the well, I didn't know it was a tuba at the time, but I was like, we got a lower end brass that is big. Could have been a baritone. Baritone's a weird choice though. I think initially I thought trombone, but like real low. I don't know how they were hitting it. I probably should have known it was not a trombone by the pitch, but just a huge sound taking up so much space. We have these very fast moving, whimsical lines coming out of some woodwinds, the saxophones, and the trumpets were just hitting these notes. It's like, dang, this is good. This is big. It's energetic. There's cool flourishes to it. It's going well with the rhythmic component that's going on. And then they all took it up to 11. If we were at 10, they took it up to 11. And the trumpets bumped it up like another half an octave. And I'm just, jeez. And the tubas somehow got bigger. And the saxophones just more, what is the word I want? Just spectacle to that fast line that they've got going on. And of course, the bass is going, the drums are going. Like, it was just, yeah, absolutely love that. It is just a magical moment to listen to that part of Reza. And I was so happy when it came back. It fills me with so much happiness, joy, power. I feel like I could go bust through a wall, Kool-Aid Man style. Um, I don't know. It's just good. And it's also perfect. And I think that's what really gets me. There were a couple of drops, primarily in the drums, which I don't blame them, keeping up this speed and consistency and constantly moving around. It's the same thing I talk about with extreme metal. It is rigorous. There's a ton of endurance that goes into it. I heard a couple of missed snare notes, accents mostly. The syncopated stuff, if I miss it, or if they miss it, I didn't hear it. But the accented hits, there were a couple that got dropped. And I'm like, that's fine. There's no way I'll keep this up perfectly anyways. So, um, y'all are humans, not machines. Where are they going with this? How do I keep getting on these tangents? Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. So the big band part was working beautifully with the speed and the energy of uh, the rhythm section, the bass, the drums, all that. And I'm just blown away by the sheer spectacle of all this. The trumpet uh, range, right? The low end brass width, the speed and flexibility and precision from the saxophones. But the more I thought about it, the trumpets are what stole the show for me. It's not because I'm a trumpet player, but that's probably why I listen to them the most out of this. It's the fact that they can hit these notes, and I don't know what it is. I probably should have. I mean, I was listening to it. That would have been rude, but I need to find what note this is. Because I'm far from my prime. I might have been able to hit something close to this note. I've hit some pretty high ones in my time. I couldn't do it today though. not not as cold as I am right now. I need a couple weeks to warm up, maybe a month to get back up there. But that note was high. And even in my prime, that's something I would have worked up to. Give me some notes to get up there and feel it. But they just come in on that note, especially as Giant Steps ends and we come back into Reza. We don't start at that half an octave lower. We go right to that big moment. And I don't even know what note it is. They just hit it clean out of like a 5 minute solo section. There's no warming up going on. There's the only warming up they have is that they've been playing the show, but they're 5 minutes cold now, and they just put the trumpet up, and they just hit it. Like how? Dang, I am envious of that. I that's hmm, and just the confidence too. Just knowing, yep, that's the note I'm going to hit. And the crazy thing is once you get up into that range, especially everything above the staff, so many notes are the same fingerings. Within the staff, under the staff, there's a lot of different fingerings. There's only three valves. I do a little bit of trumpet stuff right now. There's only three valves on a trumpet or flugelhorn. I didn't see any trumpets. Were those are flugelhorns, weren't they? I didn't see a single trumpet on stage. Anyways, they're very close. They're like sister instruments, cousin instruments. They're very very close, very similar. Um, you got three valves though, and so you're gonna have a lot of crossover. For instance, C at the bottom of the staff, G in the middle of the staff, and C at the top of the staff are all open. You don't push a single valve. To play those notes, you mess with your mouth. You change your embouchure. You loosen it or tighten it. Um, that's only three notes. Everything else in between is rather different. Like A and E are both 1 and 2, but D is 1 and 3. G can also be 1 and 3, but G is also open. Um, Here's a cool one. F sharp is just 2. B is just 2. F natural is just 1. B flat is just 1. So that's interesting. Depending on natural versus sharp or flat, the accidental on it. But there's a lot of differing elements in there. But once you get above the staff, C, E, G, C, all those are open now. And so what I'm getting at though is once you get into these higher ranges, you kind of lose a little bit of that diversity you have that helps you target notes. And a lot of the notes just become the same fingering. So you really have to know not just the fingering, but have the muscle memory to land on that note precisely. And just it's so high up there, which is just phenomenal. But then just the accuracy, the precision, the confidence to sit there and be like, I'm ready for this. I got my buttons pushed. I've got the muscle memory of my diaphragm, of air pressure, of my embouchure. Everything's ready to go, and then you just hit it, and dang, it is just that's a lot of pressure. I don't know if those flugelhorn players were feeling it, but I would be. I would be 15 years of trumpet played, and I would feel sweaty every time coming out of giant steps, knowing I gotta nail that. I don't care how many times I've done it. This could have been the 50th show on tour, and I'm still like, dang, am I gonna get it tonight? Because it's there's so much room for error. Anyways, I gotta get off this. This is bass week. So let's talk about the bass work. I think I said my piece about Reza. Let's move on to the intro and giant steps. So the intro actually starts with just drums and very little bass. I was really interested on where this was going, and it seems to more or less just be a building. We slowly introduce more elements of the rhythm section. The bass has a general lick that they play, more like a rock riff, where it's not a walking bass line. It is a 1 bar riff that eventually, or not eventually, but it changes root notes as the chords progress. And this builds into Reza. It has a very slow opening, but it allows the punch that Reza has, the volume, the width, the energy, to be felt. That is the whole purpose of the intro. And it actually makes me think that it's part of Reza. Then we move into Giant Steps. And this is where the bass takes center stage, which makes sense. It is Jaco's band. It makes, him having this really large, like 5-minute solo in the middle. Yeah, his name's on the band. He gets that spotlight. I don't know what to make of this. I think the dude is a phenomenal drummer, bass player. And there's some really nice ideas that go on in here after he catches his steam. After he kind of gets through this awkward icebreaker moment and starts to get in the groove of things. But see, the weird thing is once he starts getting into the groove of things, the drummers start playing more syncopated with what he's doing. And sometimes I'm like, okay, that's just a good guess, right? Like I've said before, during solo sections, if you play with somebody long enough, you can kind of feel out their intentions, kind of feel out their mannerisms, how they typically take things, and you can, on the fly, with no communication, line up accented ideas or rhythmic flows and get these cool little cooperative live improv elements in the music. And it's really cool when it happens. And I'll tell you, being the performer, when it works and you just get in sync and you're with somebody else and you're just making this live music with no words and you're just in sync with each other, there's nothing like it. It is so good. But there's too many moments here where I'm like, there's no way he could have guessed that. And it makes me think that at this point, when things started to click musically, when it felt like we had a pace again, and it felt like we had direction and the song was moving towards something, it feels like it was pre-composed. Maybe not entirely, but at least for these key moments, every 4 bars we're going to do this, and they line back up on them. And then it makes me think about the beginning of the solo section. And it is in stark contrast to this general flow and vibe that they have in the latter half. Jaco is up there playing these short little licks. 4 to 8 notes each, lots of space between them, lots of fiddling with the guitar. And I want to give him the benefit of the doubt here. But since this is, I think, the first time I've really analyzed something of his. I've heard his work before. One of my best friends is a bassist in the Air Force. He's like the second or third best bassist in the Air Force. I mean, the dude's he went to Rollins music school, and he's been studying bass like his whole life, as far as I know. And we played jazz together for a few years in school too. He went out gigging when I didn't, though. He's got a big passion for music. And so, like, he's made me listen to stuff. And I'm pretty sure I've listened to some Jaco from him. But I've never really analyzed it, not like this. So, I've heard him do some interesting stuff. This, though, was interesting in a different way because I'm perplexed by it. What was the point of this? It ruined the pacing of the song. It didn't really go anywhere. And I thought it was funny when he finally gets into a groove, which is when I felt that we were moving towards more pre-composed elements, that the band clapped. It's like they were just as confused, and they're like, maybe he just needs to, maybe it's like a lawnmower. You got it. Yeah, he didn't get it. He starts playing again, and he just kind of loses it and just, oh man, where do I go next? And then he finally gets into the groove, and they're like, yeah, we got it started. Like, that's what I felt at that moment. And I don't think that's what he was intending, but that's what the audience felt. And it's what I felt, was there were so many false starts. It almost felt like Jaco didn't know what to do, where to go, what he was feeling at the time. But there was also so much knob fiddling going on, trying to find a tone, that I wonder if it was a transition in disguise. It seemed like a jazz solo, and like we explored on Jazz Week, a lot of jazz soloists utilize this idea of phrasing. You play a couple of notes, you take a moment to stop. You play a couple of notes, you take a moment to stop. It's not like a guitar solo or a rock or metal solo where it's just constant all the time. It's these pockets of ideas, and maybe you get a bit of inspiration and you'll do a larger idea. And maybe you can connect all of your shorter ideas on the larger scale of things. But from the moment to moment, it's a lot of pockets of ideas and silence. And so it felt like that, but it also felt like meandering. Jazz solos don't typically give me that feeling. And that's why it kind of feels like to me he doesn't know where he's going, but also giving his pedigree and the fact that I've heard other stuff from him, I know that that's probably not what it was about. Everybody has off nights, but to me it almost feels like a transition in disguise. It kind of feels like a jazz solo, but it also feels like he's setting the bass up for the next section, finding the tone for where they were going. And so, like I said, I'm just kind of perplexed by it. Musically, it feels odd. Functionally, I can kind of see how it works, but you would also think that you would know where your knobs need to be going into the next section. If you need to make a change, it should take a second. Right into your music that you get a bar off and you set this to 7 and that to 5 and you move into the next section. So the functional aspect doesn't make sense either, unless he changes his bass tone for that section on each performance so that each one's different. That's an odd decision too. So yeah, I just don't know about that one. But once we got into that groove and we explored more of Giant Steps, and like I said, we got into more of the pre-composed stuff, I loved where the bass was going. He has a beautiful tone. I love the melody writing that he has in his style when he composes his bass-led elements. I love the way that it bounces off all the rhythmic components with the drums. Just a phenomenal rhythm section here. Honestly, I mean the I just got done praising the big band too, so the whole band's just great. Um, I think that's gonna wrap this one up. Anything I missed? I don't think so. Yeah, I loved most of this. Reza is my highlight, but for being bass week, the trumpet stood out more to me on this one, which might just be personal bias. Um, the bass was good, but that perplexing middle minute or so, it colors it all strangely. But as usual, those are just my thoughts on Jaco Pastorius's Reza, Giant Steps, Reza. What did you think? Was there anything in here that stood out to you that maybe I didn't touch on, or something that you disagree with me with, your own perspective on things? Maybe you just enjoyed the song and you want to let me know. Put that stuff down in the comments. Above the comment section is a description box. In there is a link for Linktree. Takes you to this place right here. You can find ways to support the channel. You can find my music. You can find a link to the Discord server and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. We have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We'll continue on with Bass Week and explore another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.